I owe my wife a gift, and it's for Valentine's Day, and it's March. So I need to make it really good, and I was going through my old comments. I saw MC's Creations on the last video mention this, and it hit me like the usual suspects. Every time Ashley's mentioned how much she hates her jewelry box, and rightly so. It's just a silverware box that she's repurposed. Here's the plan. I'm gonna build her a new jewelry box that's not just a regular jewelry box, it's gonna be completely suited to her needs, and I'm gonna make it heirloom quality, which means that my daughter Maeve will hopefully inherit it one day. But in order to do that, it has to meet certain criteria. One, it needs to be heirloom quality. That means traditional joinery. That means repairable. And that means a finish that can be refinished easily. Two, I need it to suit Ashley's needs. And doing a little bit of light reconnaissance, I discovered that most of her collection is of necklaces. So a necklace display needs to be in the forefront. And three, it needs to be something that's definitely made by me and can't be bought. So I'm gonna start with the pattern plywood tambour that I made in the last video, and we're gonna go from there. In the last video, I made a whole bunch of pattern plywood tambour that I backed with walnut to make them slimmer, stronger, and better looking. And I feel like it was a success. The only thing is, it requires a good bit more manual labor. Well, I've proven that they are stronger. I was using blue tape before to hold these together, but now I'm gonna add on a fabric backer to finish them off for the jewelry box. It's really hard to apply finish when they're glued to the backer because they end up sticking, so I like to apply the finish at this phase. I lock all the strips into place with a couple of plywood cleats, then I can get ready to glue on the backer. I use a fabric backer, this is just painter's drop cloth, and I apply regular wood glue to the back side of it. I like to tape out the ends so I can get a clean reveal, and I don't want the fabric to be inside of the tracks. An iron helps me smooth everything out, and it also makes sure that it dries pretty quickly. After I'm done ironing, I peel back the excess and trim it off with a blade. I then peel off the blue tape, and pretty quickly I want to remove the tambour from the mold. The reason for this is that the glue inevitably works its way between some of the strips, and it makes it not want to move freely. So I need to clean this out as quickly as possible before it dries up. This is another good reason why I finish it beforehand, otherwise these raw wood strips would have glued themselves together by now. I clean between each strip with a wet toothbrush and a rag, and now it should run smoothly. This is the test track that I made in the last video, and it turned out better than expected. It's also kind of surprised me because this was intended as the side of the cabinet, and now that I've seen it, I'm like, it looked kind of cool as the front. So here's the idea, is that Ashley opens it like this, and inside there's a necklace display that rotates. And this continues around in kind of a partial spiral that goes behind a set of drawers over here that can contain rings and other odds and ends. And I have a cool idea for how those drawers can open in an unexpected way. So I got these ring trays from Jeff Bezos, and they're pretty cool. They work like that. Just saves me a bit of fabrication time, and I like the size of them. They're pretty much the size that I envisioned. I think it'd be cool if instead of them just pulling out like a drawer, is to have them actually like pivot out from their corner, kind of like that. That's the idea, but of course it presents complications because it's wider here than it is here. So what do I do with this extra arc space? I really want this concept to work, but it's a little bit challenging to envision. So I decided to go old school and just use a pivot point and some construction paper to figure out what works and kind of how much pivot, where to place the pivot on the box. And after some finagling around, I came up with this design that I think is going to work pretty good. I want to put a piece of really figured walnut as the front sort of show piece of each one of these drawers. I cut a template out of plywood and then found the most figured piece of walnut in my racks. That figure is only on one side of the board, but I think it's going to be just enough to make 4 drawer fronts out of. I used that template to place each one of these drawer fronts so that they had the most figure possible, and then I trimmed them out roughly on the bandsaw. I made sure with the template to keep a square surface on each one of these, and then I could use my cross-cut sled to trim the ends down to the right size. I was planning on using this as a router template just to do like a template cut, but I kind of chickened out. It was too much figure and they're just too small, and I just was worried that the router bit that I'd have to use wouldn't do the job right, or it would get flung across the shop. So instead I decided to use the sander, but I was just really careful. I snuck up on the cut and I kept using the same template over and over again. The best way to check to make sure that they're right was to stack them up against each other, and they felt pretty darn good. With those 4 pieces shaped, it looked like I was making 4 drawers, so I started making some rabbit cuts into them. This is kind of a funny way to design. I really don't have the final form in my head. I'm mostly designing around what I have, which is the tambour and the interior pieces for the drawers. So I'm just going to make them around the interior pieces and see what happens. While you watch me glue up those drawers, real quick, I want to thank people for picking up the how-to pattern plywood guides. These have been years in the making, and volume 3 is now live. You can pick up all 3 volumes now. Each volume is a different style of pattern. They are easy to follow, quick guides on all the different patterns that I've developed over the years, which are numerous. I've already gotten some emails of people who have made pattern plywood for their first time, which is awesome. So go check them out on the website, almfab.com. Okay, it's the moment of truth to see whether this fits or not. Yes! All right. Perfect. After a quick sand, the drawers are ready to drill out the pivot point. I used a marking gauge to mark the right location on all 4 of the drawers, and then I used a 9/32 inch brad point bit to drill out the hole. And the reason that it's a very specific size is because I'm using a 1/4 inch rod as the pivot, and I got this sweet collection of brass from K&S, and all of their brass is telescoping. So the next size up from the 1/4 inch is 9/32, and this allows me to put a sleeve inside of the hole that I just drilled. And that sleeve relates to that heirloom quality thing I've been talking about. This just makes sure that the holes will not wear out over time. If I were to just drill a 1/4 inch hole into walnut, it might be fine for a few years, but a few decades, I don't know. Oh man, that looks so good. I love the look of brass against walnut, and unfortunately, you're not really going to see this detail, but I'm going to find some other key ways to show off the brass against walnut throughout the build, because it just looks so good. Ooh. All right. Lines up. Okay, wait, no, they open this way. Oh, I mean, not the most beautiful sound, but that's so awesome. Oh my god, it's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Okay, sweet. Happy that the drawers fit together. I wanted to add one more detail to it and add this little round over in the corners. I think it's gonna look a lot better. I needed to expose that section so that it doesn't bind up against the casing, so it'll kind of look like a barrel hinge, which I think is pretty cool to make one out of wood. Speaking of the case, that's the next step, is to start building the top and the bottom so that everything has a house to sit in. And I'm using some 6/4 walnut. This is some beefy chunks of walnut as the top and the bottom. I think they're gonna have some nice substance to them when they're done. And I figured out this technique for clamping for the Shaper Origin of just using my domino and some F-style clamps to hold it down. I'm gonna use this more in the future because it worked great. I've been reading this book called By Hand and by Eye. It's by Lost Art Press. It's a great book if you're looking to learn more about how to design furniture in a more classic style. And I used a lot of the principles, even though I'm doing kind of digital fabrication. I used a lot of the same principles for that. And I actually think that the proportions of this piece came out great, mostly because of that book. And I used a lot of the same dimensions in different orientations. The diameter of the circle is also the same width from the pivot point to the end of the drawer. Little details like that. And the result was this set of top and bottom pieces that kind of looked old-fashioned to me. They looked like an old car badge or something from the 1930s, but I'm really happy with the shape of them. They kind of surprised me, to be honest. One of the problems with designing on the fly is there really isn't a fully formed plan. So I didn't really know how to line the backside of the necklace display. And I looked at my racks. I actually had this piece of wiggle wood, and weirdly was the right width for the track that I had cut. I did not plan that at all, but it seemed to work. The only thing is that it was still too stiff. Wigglewood or bender ply or bender board it's a product that is designed to bend, obviously. It's plywood, but the two outer veneers are oriented in the same direction, and there's a thin cross-laminated veneer in the middle. And this just allows it to bend in a way that other plywoods don't. Now, it won't always bend as much as you want it to, and I've found that by wetting it and steaming it, in this case I'm using just a regular iron, I'm able to get it to bend a lot more, and eventually was able to get it to click into place. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the back panels. Those need to line up against the wiggle wood. I can use it as a reference surface so I know what angle to cut this back panel. I'm making the back panel in two parts because I want to allow for some expansion and contraction. Again, that heirloom quality thing. I need to make sure that it doesn't pull itself apart as it expands. In order to do that, I make a little rabbet on each side of the back panels, and then those can slot together. And as it expands and contracts, it's not going to reveal a gap. It'll just reveal the rest of that rabbet. To make it blend in, I also cut some channels down the back side, so it looks like it's made of a bunch of panels, but I only really need it to expand like a 1/16 or an 1/8. So it's just an illusion. It's really just to make it look cool and make it look proportional. I also marked out for a slot to receive the side panel. This is gonna give a lot of structure to the cabinet, and it's going to be like the stop for the drawers when they open and close. It's really fun to build on this scale. I don't often build this small, but it's fun to kind of apply bigger furniture techniques to a smaller piece like this. There's a small element that's going to act as a stop for both the drawers and the tambour, and because I routed out the tracks, it needs some curves and some angles. So I decided to just use my hand plane to get that. I snuck up on it and slowly got it to the right size. Now you can see how that stop fits in, and you can also see how everything's starting to slot together. It's like a little puzzle, and it's really fun to see things starting to fall into place. I put the drawers inside of the cabinets because I need a measurement, and this is going to be for a divider for the upper space. And criteria number 2, it needs to be custom made for Ashley. I looked through the jewelry that she has, and she has some really cool jewelry boxes, including one that I made for her engagement ring. And I like the idea that she can customize this space herself because I don't have her input on this design. So this upper area is just kind of, if she wants me to make a shelf, I'll make a shelf. If she just wants to pack it full of little jewelry boxes, she can do that too. I wasn't really sure how to get the door to work at this point. It was a really rough idea, but I knew that I wanted to use the brass rod as the pivot point. I might as well because I already have it, so I'm just going to run the brass rod all the way through the cabinet. So I need to drill a hole for that. I used the same 9/32 drill bit, but I'm not going to put a piece of brass tubing in it because I'm worried that it'll be too tight and I don't want it to bind if I got the hole in the wrong location. I trimmed down as much as I could of the tenon that will eventually go through the side, and then I rounded it over with a chisel to match the drawers below. It was a little too thin to go through the router. It's now starting to look like a cabinet. It's working pretty good, and I love the look of the barrel hinge, but it's missing a key element, which is that side panel. I've been holding on to this highly figured piece of walnut forever. I've just never had a good use for it, and this felt perfect. So I resawed it down to the right width that I needed, and then I ran it through the drum sander to clean it up. This thing is going to be spectacular once it has finish on it. To fulfill criteria number 1, heirloom quality, I decided to challenge myself and do an inset tenon on this side panel. I used my tenoning jig. This is a jig that I have plans for on my website. It's super handy, it's great at making tenons, and it works with just about any table saw. I've got a whole bunch of other plans on the website, so make sure you go visit almfab.com/plans and pick up jig plans, shop furniture, all sorts of things. Using a marking knife, I marked the corners that need to be cut off and trimmed them using my Suizan Japanese pull saw. I rounded the front edge to match the profile that was cut out by the router. And then on my router table, I also rounded over the front edge to match that barrel hinge look. So that side panel registers to the back panel well and cleanly. I also put a little channel in the back side of it, and this will just help hold the whole thing together. With a nice fit there, I decided to do something kind of risky. I wanted to do a through tenon with this divider panel, and the best solution I could come up with was to cut a slot with origin. Now I need that to line up perfectly with the slots I'd already cut in the back panel. So what I should have done was cut this first and then do the slots in the back panel, but here we are. I ended up nailing the line on the bottom of the slot, but the top of the slot still needed more room. So I expanded the cut, and as a result, it expanded the ends of the cut, and I ended up with this trapezoidal shape. I wasn't expecting it. I was mad at first, but I think it ended up being a happy accident. I matched that shape with a series of hand tools, and ultimately it looked kind of cool. But the big question is, does it fit? I could see a little bit of light through it, but considering that's my first through tenon, I'm pretty happy. That shelf was a pain, but it's in now. The thing you didn't see is that I actually had to make it twice. This one works. The whole case is holding together nicely. So now I'm going to turn my attention to building the door up top. And there's one problem. The drill bit that I have is not long enough to go this full length. So I've got two options. One is to try and drill it from both sides, which could work, or what I'm probably going to do is make multiple of these sort of hinge style cleats, maybe 2 or 3, and stack them up here so it just keeps this kind of consistent look, and then that'll attach onto the back with brass screws. I also need to figure out what I'm doing for the drawer and door fronts. I have a couple cool ideas, but first let's figure out this hinge. The simplest solution in my head was to just make it out of one block and drill it from both sides. Now this can be really hard if you don't get a perfect alignment, or if your drill bit starts to bend slightly as it's going. It can result in a misaligned hole, which means that the thing will bind. I did my best to measure it out and drill it as straight as I could. To my eyes, it looked pretty good, but the real test is whether or not that tube will fit in. Ooh. All right. Yeah, that fits. Step 1 was good. Now step 2 is to try and slide the pivot in. And to give it the best shot of working, I used some Bumblechutes shop wax to lubricate it. And it went in without too much trouble. Now that I had a block with a hole that was in the right location, I could start shaping it. And I used a whole series of router bits to get it down to a shape that kind of mimicked a lot of the router shapes that were already on the cabinet. I kept thinning it out and trimming it down until I really liked the look of it. And then once I did, I thought it'd be cool to have kind of like arms that stick off of it. This will help keep whatever the drawer front is going to be flat, and I think it's just going to look kind of cool. The next thing on the list to work on is the thing that's going to display the necklaces, and it's got to do a couple things. It's got to hold the necklaces. 1, it needs to rotate so that Ashley can access the necklaces at the back. 2, and 3, it needs to be maintainable. I need to be able to do maintenance on it if anything should go wrong. So I decided to go with a threaded insert in the top so I can use a bolt to connect the rest of the assembly. I love the idea that when Ashley goes to spin this, that it'll just kind of continue to rotate. And my first thought was to go for a bearing or skateboard bearings, but they don't really work in the right orientation. So I asked people on Instagram what they thought I should use, and a lot of people sent me replies saying to use a thrust bearing. I'd never heard of these, but they seem pretty cool. It's basically 2 washers with grooves in it with a bearing assembly in the middle of it, and it seems to work pretty good. Now to cut out a cool shape that goes around it. The idea here is to use brass pins to stick out of this wheel and use the shape to sort of allow me to locate each one of those pins evenly. So this is a 10-pointed kind of flower shape, and I connected the corners of the rectangles to find the centers, used my awl, and then I can head over to the drill press and drill them out. These are table leaf alignment pins, and I found them just by doing a search for brass pins. They turned out to be perfect. They have machined ridges on the outside that allow her to hang more than one necklace off of each pin. I wasn't in love with the shape, and I thought that by going over to the router and cleaning it up, I might fall more in love with it, because the idea was to make it kind of look like a flower. But ultimately, I thought it looked kind of dumb. So I ended up remaking it, and I made it out of just a regular circle. And I think it looks so much better. I was about to start veneering the Wigglewood to go behind the necklace display, but I'll be honest, I really don't like veneering. I've had it go sideways on me in the past, and I thought maybe it'd just be easier to cut it out of thin strips and put those into the slots. I don't know if this is a better solution, but it's definitely a different one, and it's the one that I ended up going with. All right, so I've been thinking about what I need to do for the drawer fronts, and I've come up with a few different ideas, and the one that keeps sticking in my brain is to make solid walnut look like pattern plywood. And I found this piece of walnut that's got a very straight grain. So what if I cut this on a 45-degree angle, cut it into strips, and glue it up like this so that it kind of mimics this without being exactly the same all the way across the drawer front. Could look good, could look bad, but there's only one way to find out. We're on to criteria 3 right now, which is make it something that Michael Alm would make, and I thought this would be a cool idea. This is something that's been in my brain forever, and I've always wanted to try, so now it just seemed like a good time to try it. Oh no, that was not glued for long enough. Okay, let's try this again. After being patient and having a successful glue up the second time, I cut it on a 45-degree angle to start making the chevron pattern. And I'm really curious. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd be interested in me experimenting more with this and like what other pattern you'd like to see me try with a different species of wood maybe, or what application you think would be good for this, because I think there's a lot more to explore here. That's too much. I'm going to, I think I'm just going to make it out of walnut, just raw walnut. I'll save this technique for another time though, because it is kind of cool, but I just don't think this is the right application. Oh, that's so much better. Okay, so the new solution is to use this sapwood. I think that one thing that was bothering me is that this is so golden in color that it didn't tie into much else. But adding the sapwood, hopefully that'll be a nice, oh man, I really like that a lot. Okay, so that kind of like blends the pattern plywood into the solid bit. I'm just gonna cut this apart, turn it into drawer fronts, and I think we're good. A lot of extra work, but we're good. Design is an iterative process, and a lot of times your first solution is not the best solution. So I'm glad to have remade it, and this looks awesome. I'm thrilled, and I want to add some brass highlights into it. Like I said, once this thing gets finish on it, that brass is gonna pop. I put a round over on a piece of brass bar, and then cut it down short so I can use it as the handle. I then drilled corresponding holes into the drawer fronts to accept some brass rod. Oh, it just feels like there are parts everywhere at this point. So I've got the drawer fronts done. They are ready to be glued on. And in order to do that, I need to make sure that everything aligns. So what I did is I drilled a hole all the way through the bottom so I can slide the brass rod up from the bottom, and eventually I'll make like a little cap here to cover it up, but I want to be able to remove the brass rod in case of maintenance. So brass rod goes in there. Now I'm going to assemble everything around this rod, and then the main reason that I need to cut it to length right now is so that I can get the top on, because I want to make sure that everything's aligned perfectly before I commit to where these drawer fronts go. I spaced all the hinged components out with the brass washers, and it got rid of that terrible noise from before. Now I can lay out all the drawer fronts, and I can actually stack these on top of each other because of the orientation that I cut the fronts out of. The wood is going to expand laterally, so it's going to expand widthwise, not vertically. So I don't actually need a gap between the different drawers. This helps keep that continuous grain looking really, really sharp, and I'll probably have to sand between the drawers a little bit so they don't drag on each other, but honestly, it's just such a clean look. I'm really, really happy. To glue the door at the top, it was pretty much the same thing, except for I did tape out the cabinet so that the glue wouldn't leach into it, causing problems in the finishing stage. I liked the look of it, but it felt like it was missing something, so I ordered a little 4-inch mirror. I thought it'd be cool for Ashley to have a mirror inside of it, and as long as I can pull this up without cracking it, it's going to be pretty cool. Really feels like I'm closing in on it, and one of the things that I need to do is add a handle to the tambour. So I just took a piece of brass flat stock, rounded it over, and routed out a strip of walnut that it can insert into. I'm using this all-natural wood finish from Bumblechutes on the rest of the cabinet, so I decided to pre-finish the pole with it before gluing it down to the rest of the tambour. When I glued the tambour before, I left a little bit of extra fabric just so that I could glue on this handle. And once it was glued on, I trimmed the rest off. And then I also covered up the fabric because it's not my favorite look. It's just a really good fabric for this application. So I ordered some peel and stick green velvet, and I think it looks pretty slick. I need to figure out a slick way to cover up the hole in the bottom that I drilled through for the brass rod. So I came up with this idea of cutting some circular feet that'll go underneath. This will serve two purposes. One of them will be removable so we can cover up that brass rod, and two, it'll give a little shadow line and relief underneath the piece, and I think it'll look a lot better. I drilled out the holes in the base, and then I also drilled out a second hole in the one with the brass rod, and this will just allow enough room so I can get some needle nose pliers in there and pull the rod out. I glued in the normal feet and screwed on the removable foot. I use some shop wax on the screw just to make sure that it doesn't break because this is a brass screw. And I offset that center hole because there's a hole underneath there. So whenever I need to access this, I can, but for now, it's nice and secure. And the reveal looks pretty good too. Now all the parts are made and it's ready for sanding, polishing, and finishing. All right, all the parts are made. They're looking awesome. They're sanded up to 220 grit, and I've cleaned them with mineral spirits and added a bit of masking tape on critical areas because I'm gonna apply a coat of finish before I glue it up. I'm just doing this because in the past, you see little bits of glue in the corners that don't absorb the finish, so I want to avoid that. And for the finish, I'm gonna be using this Bumblechutes all natural wood finish. This is a great finish if you want that kind of old world heirloom look to it. It is a tung oil finish, 100% tung oil. It's not the chemical bath that you buy at the hardware store. This is tung oil, organic gum rosin, and food grade citrus solvent. It just smells like oranges and it looks awesome. It's gonna bring out the luster in the wood. I'm gonna do one coat of that, which is basically a flood coat, wipe all of it off, and then I'll do a top coat with the Binuba wax after it's all finished. And this is a hard wax oil finish. I can put multiple coats on there and burnish it off. You just wanna make sure and do really light coats with this stuff. A little bit goes a long way. All right, let's get started because I cannot wait to see what this walnut looks like with finish on it. Okay, let's talk about this finish because I am so impressed by it. Oh my God. So, Eric and I met at WorkbenchCon. He owns Bumblechutes. It's a family-owned business, and he procures all of the materials locally from local farms and stuff. And he's been telling me for years to try the wood finish. I had it in my shop. I believe I tested it on some pattern plywood, and it went really yellow. I generally do not recommend oil finishes for pattern plywood, but for walnut, oh my God, I am so impressed by this. It's beautiful. One thing when using oil-based finishes, just pause for a second and look at how pretty this is. It's just so good. One thing about using oil-based finishes is you need to wipe off all the excess, otherwise it will never dry. But it just has the perfect luster to it. If you're interested in picking up some Bumblechutes, he gave me an offer code of ALMFAB for 10% off. Go check it out. He's a great guy, and support a small business because they're making a hell of a product. The assembly was a dream up until I got to the point where I had to put the top on, and I realized that there was no way for me to get these slats to align. How can I do this without it being a nightmare? I took a breath and I thought about it and realized that the problem was that the slats wanted to go backwards. So I cut out this little rib and designed it so it would slot into the dado that's already there. And that allowed me to put the slats back in, and now they're not going to go backwards. So it makes it a little bit easier. It's still tricky to put it together, but at least made it possible. I also gained a good bit of working time using Total Boat epoxy, so I don't have to worry about it setting up while I'm working on it. It's going to take a few hours before it's starting to dry. Thank God. To make it easier to put the top on, I removed the brass rod and all of the drawers. But fortunately, I drilled that hole in the bottom and have that removable foot, so I just flipped it over and assembled it upside down. As this thing comes together, I cannot wait to share it with Ashley and can't wait to see her reaction to it. I also thought about maybe that somebody else would like to build this, and I asked people on Instagram. It seemed like there was a lot of people who wanted to build this, so I have made plans available for pre-sale now on my website, almfab.com/plans. I've also provided all of the CNC files for free to the Patreon supporters. So if you're a Patreon supporter or if you're thinking about becoming a Patreon supporter, come and join us, hang out, and we talk about all the projects that everybody else is working on. It's a super fun community. I'm so appreciative to have everybody in there. Thanks so much to the Patreon supporters. You guys are the best. And now let's see what Ashley thinks of this thing. Do you remember that Valentine's Day gift I promised you?
I do. You ready?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Ooh, wow. Wow, Michael.
What do you think?
It's gorgeous. Wow. Oh, look how gorgeous that is. You did your research.
Yeah. I noticed you had a lot of necklaces.
I have a lot of necklaces. Oh, that's so fun. Is that your?
That's my wedding ring.
I was like, I don't think I have a men's wedding ring. Is there a diamond in one of these?
You wish.
Oh, this is beautiful, Michael.
Do you like it?
I love it. Better late than never. Mother's Day is just around the corner.
Oh no.
You want to see what your daddy made?
What do you think, babe?
What do you think?
It'll be yours someday.
Yeah, look at it. Look at this. Whoa.